Most people know the Maya for pyramids, sacrifice, and the calendar, once linked to the end of the world. But their real story is stranger and far more human. Jeweled teeth, hidden roads, folding books, and writing that preserves real lives. We begin with number 10. Cacao was more than chocolate. Inside an elite tomb at Rio Azul, in what is now Guatemala, archaeologists discovered several ceramic vessels. One of them was tall and cylindrical, decorated with painted figures and sealed with a lid. Whatever liquid it once held had disappeared more than 1,000 years ago. But not every trace was gone. Researchers examined residues trapped inside the vessel, searching for compounds associated with cacao. Two were particularly useful: theobromine and caffeine. Finding them together provided strong evidence that cacao had once been prepared, stored, or served inside the container. The result confirmed something already visible on several Maya vessels. Writing. Some ceramic inscriptions describe the object as a drinking cup. Others name the substance it was intended to contain. The word cacao, an ancestor of the modern word cacao, appears in Maya texts connected with particular drinks and vessels. A painted cup could therefore carry several layers of information at once. Its shape suggested how it was used. Its images communicated social or religious ideas, and its inscription could identify the owner, the artist, the vessel itself, or what it was meant to hold. The drink would have been very different from the sweet chocolate familiar today. Cacao beans had to be fermented, dried, roasted, and ground into a paste. That paste could then be mixed with water and other ingredients. Depending on the place and occasion, the drink may have included maize, chili, honey, or aromatic plants. Foam appears to have been especially important. By repeatedly pouring the liquid from one vessel into another, attendants could create a thick layer of bubbles. The drink became a performance as much as a refreshment. Painted scenes show vessels being prepared and presented in courtly settings. Cacao appears in elite feasts, diplomatic exchanges, ritual events, and burials. It could serve as a valued gift, a display of hospitality, or part of a political gathering. Yet cacao was not necessarily reserved for kings, and it was not used only in sacred ceremonies. Its meaning depended on where it was found and how it was used. A vessel buried with a ruler played a different role from one used in a household or exchanged during a feast. There is another complication. A cup labeled for cacao was not automatically filled with cacao every time it appeared. Some vessels may have been presented as gifts, displayed as prestige objects, inherited, or placed in graves without ever being used for drinking. The inscription tells us what the object was called or what it was intended for. Chemistry helps reveal what actually happened inside it. That is what makes cacao such a powerful archaeological clue. Writing provides one piece of the story. Chemical residue provides another. Neither is complete by itself. Together, they bring back an activity that vanished centuries ago. Someone harvested the pods. Someone prepared the beans. Someone ground the cacao and poured the drink. Another person may have consumed it during a feast, a negotiation, or a ceremony. Eventually, the vessel entered a tomb and disappeared from view. Cacao opens a window into far more than diet. It reveals agriculture, trade, craftsmanship, hospitality, social rank, and written language. A familiar flavor becomes evidence of an entire cultural system. And the Maya did not express identity only through the objects they owned. Sometimes they marked it directly on the body. Number 9. They modified and inlaid their teeth. Teeth often survive when almost everything else has disappeared. To archaeologists, they can reveal age, diet, illness, and periods of stress during childhood. Some Maya teeth preserve something more deliberate: design. People filed their front teeth into points, notches, and carefully shaped edges. Others had small circular cavities drilled into the surface. Polished pieces of jadeite, pyrite, or other materials were then fitted into the openings. These were not temporary decorations. They became permanent parts of a person's smile. The procedure required considerable control. Drilling too deeply could expose the living pulp inside the tooth. That could cause severe pain, infection, or tooth loss. The craftsperson had to create a cavity large enough to hold the inlay, while leaving enough of the tooth intact. The stone then had to be fixed securely. Studies of surviving examples suggest that Maya specialists used adhesive mixtures capable of keeping the inlays in place for many years. Some remained attached until the person died. Others were still embedded when archaeologists uncovered the teeth more than a millennium later. The choice of material mattered. Jadeite was highly valued in many Maya regions. Its green color could evoke vegetation, water, fertility, breath, and preciousness. Pyrite created a bright, reflective surface. When the wearer spoke or smiled, the inlays may have caught the light. The effect would have been difficult to overlook. But the practice was not limited to kings. Modified teeth have been found among both men and women in different communities and social settings. Some people received only subtle filing. Others carried complex patterns across several teeth. That variety suggests there was no single explanation for the custom. One design may have communicated beauty. Another may have reflected adulthood, family identity, local tradition, or social distinction. Patterns found within certain burial groups suggest that some styles could have been shared among relatives or people with a similar geographic background. But those connections remain difficult to prove. A tooth preserves the modification. It does not preserve the conversation that led someone to choose it. The practice is sometimes described as primitive dentistry. That description misses the point. These procedures were not primarily attempts to repair decay or restore damaged teeth. They were intentional cultural alterations. Calling them simple decoration, however, also understates their importance. A modified smile was visible during conversation, trade, ritual, and public life. It became part of the way a person was recognized. The process itself may have carried meaning. The individual had to remain still while the tooth was filed or drilled. Pain, endurance, skill, and appearance came together in a single act. Some teeth show remarkably little damage around the cavity. That suggests careful and experienced work. Others show infection or later complications. Not every procedure succeeded, but enough examples survive to reveal a developed technical tradition. Clothing can be removed. Jewelry can be exchanged. A polished stone fixed inside a living tooth stays with the person. The body itself becomes a lasting social statement. It could also become the focus of healing, purification, and transformation inside buildings designed for heat and steam. Number 8. Sweat baths were places of healing and transformation. A Maya sweat bath was often smaller and less imposing than the temples and palaces around it. The interior was low and enclosed. Stones were heated. Water produced steam. The chamber quickly became hot, dark, and humid. At the most basic level, the purpose seems familiar. People entered, sweated, washed, and emerged. But some sweat baths carried meanings far beyond hygiene. At the ancient city of Zultun, archaeologists investigated a structure known as Los Sapos. Its facade was not designed like an ordinary building. It was shaped as a supernatural being. Although only part of the figure survived, the architecture suggested that the structure itself represented a living or sacred entity. Entering the chamber may have felt like entering a body. The physical experience supported that interpretation. A dark room filled with heat and moisture resembled a cave. In Maya thought, caves could be openings into powerful places beneath the earth. They were associated with water, fertility, ancestors, origins, and forces capable of both creating and ending life. A sweat bath could reproduce some of those qualities within a constructed space. Heat opened the body. Steam surrounded it. Water moved across skin and stone. The person who emerged had undergone a physical change, even if only temporarily. Evidence from Los Sapos has been connected with healing, childbirth, and regeneration. The imagery of the structure may relate to female supernatural power and the process of birth. That does not mean every Maya sweat bath functioned as a maternity room, nor does it prove that one ritual was followed throughout every Maya region. Los Sapos matters because it shows how one community understood one particular building. The structure was eventually closed and buried, but its importance did not disappear with its original function. Long after people stopped using it as an ordinary sweat bath, members of the community returned and left offerings. Archaeologists found ceramics, animal remains, and other materials associated with ritual activity. The building had entered social memory. People no longer used it in the same way, but they still recognized its presence. That response makes sense if architecture was not viewed as lifeless. A building could possess identity. It could embody a supernatural force. It could participate in the well-being of a community. And when its active life ended, it might need to be closed and remembered through ritual. Sweat baths also had practical value. Heat and steam can relax muscles, clean the skin, and support physical recovery. In many traditional societies, similar spaces are used during illness or after childbirth. Physical relief and spiritual meaning do not have to be separated. For the people using the structure, healing could involve the body, the family, the community, and the supernatural world at the same time. This is a pattern that appears repeatedly in Maya archaeology. An everyday object may also be sacred. A sacred place may still serve a practical need. Modern categories divide medicine, religion, and architecture into separate subjects. Maya communities may not have experienced them that way. Los Sapos shows how a small building could manage heat, care for bodies, preserve memory, and connect people with forces beneath the earth. Heat also played a role in another Maya achievement. This time, it was used to create a color so durable that its chemistry still attracts scientific attention. Number 7. Maya blue was an engineered pigment. Traces of an intense blue survive on Maya murals, ceramics, sculptures, and ritual objects. The tropical environment should have destroyed much of it. Humidity, rain, heat, microorganisms, and chemical reactions in the soil can rapidly attack organic color. Yet Maya blue often endured. Its durability puzzled researchers because it was neither an ordinary mineral pigment nor a simple plant dye. The secret existed at a microscopic scale. Maya blue was a hybrid material. Its organic component came from indigo-producing plants. The plants were processed to extract a deep blue colorant. On its own, indigo could fade or break down. The second ingredient was usually palygorskite, a clay mineral containing extremely small internal channels. When the indigo and clay were combined and heated under suitable conditions, the color molecules became closely associated with the mineral structure. The clay helped trap and protect them. The resulting pigment resisted moisture, temperature changes, and chemical attack far better than indigo alone. This was not likely to have resulted from a single accidental mixture. Artisans had to identify the right plants. They needed access to suitable clay. Both materials had to be prepared. Then the mixture had to be heated. The precise temperatures and production methods may have varied. Researchers continue to examine whether ingredients were heated in ceramic containers during incense burning or through several different regional techniques. There may never have been one universal recipe. What is clear is that the finished pigment depended on controlled knowledge. This was materials engineering developed through observation, experiment, and repeated practice. The clay itself reveals a wider story. Mineral and chemical studies have linked some ancient samples to specific deposits in the northern Maya region. The material had to be recognized, collected, transported, exchanged, or processed near its source. A patch of blue on a wall therefore represents far more than an artistic decision. Behind it were botanical knowledge, mineral extraction, specialized labor, heat control, transportation, and craftsmanship. The color also carried symbolic meaning. Blue could be associated with water, rain, sky, preciousness, or particular supernatural beings. At some sites, it appears on objects and human remains connected with sacrifice. But Maya blue did not belong to one ceremony alone. Its significance changed with the object, location, and period in which it was used. The pigment challenges another old assumption. Ancient knowledge is sometimes judged by whether it resembles modern industrial science. The makers of Maya blue did not describe crystal channels or molecular bonding in scientific equations. They did not need to. They knew that certain plants, certain clays, and certain heating methods produced a color that behaved differently. Their knowledge was expressed through craft. An artisan may have learned by watching another specialist. The mixture changed as it heated. Some batches failed. Others produced a color that survived rain and time. Successful methods were remembered and taught. What looks like a simple pigment becomes evidence of an experimental tradition. That color appeared in places where art, ceremony, and public life came together. One of the most dynamic of those spaces was the ball court. Number 6. The ball game was more than a sport. In many Mesoamerican cities, archaeologists find two long structures facing one another across a narrow playing area. Seen from above, the court may resemble a capital letter I. This was the setting for the ball game. Players used a solid rubber ball that could be heavy enough to cause serious injury. Images show athletes wearing belts, pads, and protective equipment around the hips, arms, or knees. In some forms of the game, the ball appears to have been struck with the hip or upper leg. Other communities may have followed different techniques. There was no single set of rules used unchanged across every city and century. Even courts built during similar periods vary in size, shape, and design. The ball game was not one standardized sport. It was a family of related traditions. Some matches may have been competitive entertainment. Others were staged ceremonies. Certain games involved elite performers, political representatives, or captives. The court itself was usually placed near important public architecture. It might stand beside plazas, temples, palaces, or processional routes. Its location made the game visible. A match could gather a crowd, display wealth, reinforce social hierarchy, and turn political relationships into public performance. Rulers used ball game imagery to associate themselves with strength and supernatural authority. Some inscriptions and reliefs connect the court with warfare. A captured enemy might be shown as a defeated player. A game could symbolically repeat a military victory. But political imagery is not a complete record of ordinary competition. That distinction matters because of one of the most repeated claims about the Maya. The losing team, people often say, was always sacrificed. The evidence does not support that conclusion. Human sacrifice was real in ancient Mesoamerica. Some ballgame scenes include captives, decapitation, or death. At particular places and moments, the game clearly intersected with warfare and sacrifice. But there is no reason to believe that every match ended with the execution of the losing players. Some games may have helped settle disputes. Others marked festivals or calendar events. Some were probably elite theater. Many were almost certainly played without anyone being killed. The court also carried mythological meaning. Stories recorded in later Maya tradition describe heroic figures confronting the lords of the underworld through a dangerous ball game. The playing space could therefore evoke a boundary between worlds. A ball disappeared and returned. It struck the ground and rose again. That movement could suggest cycles of life, death, and renewal. The court became more than a sports field. It could represent a mythic landscape. Players moved through a story involving humans, gods, ancestors, and cosmic forces. The mixture of sport and political symbolism is not entirely foreign to the modern world. Today, Games are surrounded by flags, ceremonies, national identity, celebrity, and power. The Maya organized those connections differently, but they understood that physical performance could carry meaning far beyond entertainment. A match might honor a deity, confirm an alliance, humiliate an enemy, mark a significant day, or demonstrate a ruler's relationship with forces described in myth. The ball court was a place of movement, danger, celebration, and public memory. But it was only one part of a much larger urban landscape. Players, spectators, traders, officials, and ritual specialists still needed to move through the city. For that, the Maya built roads. Some were raised above the surrounding terrain. Some extended for many kilometers. And when their surfaces were new, they may have appeared as pale lines crossing the landscape. Number 5. They built elevated white roads. Many Maya sites are now surrounded by dense tropical vegetation. A temple rises above the canopy, while smaller buildings disappear beneath roots and soil. The result is deceptive. The ruins seem like isolated monuments separated by wilderness. Modern mapping has revealed a very different landscape. Beneath the forest lie house platforms, reservoirs, terraces, plazas, defensive works, and roads. Some of those roads are known as sakbiob, or white roads. The singular form is sakbi. They were constructed from stone, earth, rubble, and lime-rich surfacing material. Many were raised above the surrounding ground. Elevation created a stable path across uneven land and seasonal wetlands. The pale surface reflected light. A newly maintained road may have remained visible beneath the moon, although its practical value did not depend on appearance alone. Not every sakbi served the same purpose. A short causeway might connect two structures within a ceremonial center. Another could link a palace with a plaza. Longer routes connected residential districts, agricultural areas, marketplaces, or separate settlements. Some roads probably carried ritual processions. Others supported the daily movement of food, water, building materials, messengers, and people. At Caracol, in modern Belize, archaeologists mapped a broad network of causeways extending through a large urban landscape. The roads connected central architecture with residential and administrative groups farther away. This allowed a dispersed population to function as an integrated city. The urban area was not limited to one dense center. Communities spread across a wide region. Roads helped coordinate them. They supported exchange and provided access to public, economic, and ceremonial spaces. They also made political relationships visible. A road physically tied one district to another. Its construction required organized labor. Its maintenance required continued cooperation or authority. The places it connected revealed which centers and communities mattered. The discovery of many road networks accelerated with LiDAR. From an aircraft, LiDAR instruments send millions of laser pulses toward the ground. Most strike leaves and branches. Some pass through gaps in the canopy and reach the surface below. Researchers combine those measurements to create detailed models of the terrain. When the vegetation is digitally reduced, straight lines begin to appear. Terraces emerge across hillsides. Rectangular platforms cover areas once described as empty forest. Roads join places that looked isolated from the ground. LiDAR does not replace excavation. A line in the data must still be inspected. Researchers need physical evidence to determine its age, construction, and purpose. But the technology changed the scale of Maya archaeology. Investigations no longer have to focus only on temples and monumental centers. Entire regions can be studied as engineered landscapes. The white roads also show why there was no single Maya city plan. Some cities were compact. Others were widely dispersed. Certain communities relied heavily on causeways. Others organized movement in different ways. Roads responded to local terrain, political needs, and population patterns. Their white surfaces may have carried ritual or symbolic associations. But they were also infrastructure. People walked on them. Goods moved across them. Communities depended on them. What appears today as a temple standing alone in the forest once belonged to a connected landscape. Those roads carried bodies, resources, and messages. Maya knowledge traveled in other ways as well. It was carved on monuments, painted on pottery, and recorded inside books that unfolded like screens. Number 4. Their books folded like screens. Only 4 Maya books from the pre-colonial tradition are widely accepted as surviving today. 4 books from a civilization that produced written knowledge for centuries. That number might suggest that books were rare. The evidence points in the opposite direction. Painted scenes show scribes working with folded manuscripts. Texts refer to writing and learning. Archaeologists have found fragments and traces of books too damaged to read. The surviving codices are remnants of a much larger intellectual tradition. A Maya book did not resemble a modern bound volume. Its pages formed a continuous strip. The writing surface was made from processed plant fiber, commonly associated with bark paper. A light-colored coating created a smoother surface for painting and writing. The strip was folded back and forth like an accordion. When closed, it was compact enough to carry. When opened, it became a long sequence of text and images. The Dresden Codex, one of the best preserved examples, extends for more than 3.5 meters when fully unfolded. Its pages combine figures, numbers, day signs, and glyphic writing. The arrangement is dense. A single section may contain several layers of information operating together. Reading it required training. The surviving codices include almanacs and tables connected with ritual, agriculture, health, marriage, warfare, and the movement of celestial bodies. The Dresden Codex contains calculations involving Venus and tables associated with eclipses. These were not astronomy books in the modern sense. Maya specialists did not necessarily separate celestial observation from ritual interpretation. The appearance of Venus could be linked with warfare, danger, divine action, or the timing of ceremonies. Prediction had practical, political, and religious importance. The books were working instruments. A calendar specialist could consult a sequence of days. A ritual expert could study the forces associated with a particular date. A royal court could plan an event within a larger cycle. Figures of gods, animals, objects, and actions helped guide interpretation. The manuscripts also reveal a degree of standardization. Scribes followed conventions when presenting numbers, signs, and figures. That implies institutions capable of training specialists. Paper had to be prepared. Pigments had to be produced. Brushes had to be controlled. Writing had to be understood. Calculations had to be checked. Only 4 pre-colonial codices are known to survive. The Dresden, Madrid, Paris, and the Maya Codex of Mexico. Their rarity is the result of several destructive forces. The tropical environment quickly damages organic material. Political upheaval and warfare destroyed collections. Colonial campaigns deliberately burned indigenous books. Other manuscripts may have decayed, survived only as fragments, or remain undiscovered. It is difficult to measure the scale of that loss. Imagine trying to understand an entire modern civilization from 4 damaged books. Even those few survivors are enough to overturn older assumptions. The Maya were once presented mainly as builders of temples and monuments. The codices reveal a culture of portable knowledge. Information could move. Tables could be consulted. Cycles could be compared. A trained reader could carry complex systems from one place to another. There is something intimate about a book. A stone inscription addresses the public and the future. A folded manuscript can be opened, closed, turned, carried, and studied. The reader controls the pace. One section leads into the next. Many of the systems recorded on those pages concerned the movement of the sky. But time was not confined to books. In some Maya communities, it was also built into the orientation of architecture. Number 3. architecture helped organize time. Before sunrise, someone stands on the western side of a broad plaza. Across the open space is a long platform supporting several structures. The eastern horizon begins to brighten. The sun appears near one point on the architecture. Weeks later, it rises somewhere else. Across the year, the position moves north and south before reversing direction. Repeated observation turns the built environment into a reference system. Archaeologists use the term E-group for a category of Maya architectural arrangement named after a complex at Waxacton. A typical example includes a western structure facing a longer platform on the eastern side of a plaza. The arrangement creates a clear line of sight towards sunrise. Early researchers proposed that these complexes functioned as solar observatories. From a fixed position on the west, buildings on the eastern platform appeared to mark sunrise near important points of the year. The explanation was elegant. Later research revealed a more complicated picture. Some E-groups show orientations connected with important solar positions. Others do not match a simple solstice or equinox model. Buildings changed over time. Observation points shifted. Local hills altered the horizon. Many complexes also contain evidence of activities that cannot be reduced to astronomy. The solar patterns still matter. Studies of architectural orientation have identified repeated alignments associated with particular dates and intervals. Some may have helped communities anticipate agricultural seasons. Preparing fields, planting crops, and organizing harvests required attention to changes in rainfall and sunlight. A structure that helped track those changes had practical value, but the value was also social. A calendar does more than measure time. It tells a community when to gather, when to make offerings, when to renew authority, when to remember an event. If the sun appeared at a meaningful position behind a ceremonial structure, many people could witness it together. Time became public. It unfolded in a plaza before an audience. E-group complexes also preserve long ritual histories. At sites such as Sival, archaeologists found offerings deposited during repeated phases of construction. Objects were arranged, broken, buried, or covered as the buildings were renewed. The location remained important, even as the architecture changed. A new floor covered an earlier one. A later platform stood above an older structure. Generation after generation returned to the same place. Architecture recorded memory through layers. This is why describing every E-group as an observatory is misleading. The word suggests a building devoted mainly to detached scientific measurement. Maya complexes could combine observation, ceremony, political display, ancestral memory, and community assembly. A ruler might use a solar event to strengthen legitimacy. Farmers might recognize a seasonal signal. Ritual specialists could make offerings. Families could gather in the plaza. These activities were not mutually exclusive. The architecture organized both space and expectation. People knew where to stand, where to look, when to return, and why the event mattered. Many ancient societies aligned buildings with the sky. The Maya case is especially revealing because architecture connected celestial observation with writing, mathematics, agriculture, ceremony, and political life. A sunrise could mark one moment. Maya time, however, was not contained within a single annual cycle. One day could occupy several calendars at the same time. To understand that system, we have to enter a world of interlocking numbers. Number 2. The Maya used several calendars at once. The phrase Maya calendar creates the wrong impression. It sounds like one system divided into months and years. The Maya used several cycles. Each described time in a different way. One of the most important was a count of 260 days. It combined 20 named days with a repeating sequence of 13 numbers. The first number joined the first day name. The next day joined the second number with the next name. Because 13 and 20 repeated at different rates, The same combination returned only after 260 days. This cycle organized ritual meaning. A day might be considered favorable for one activity and dangerous for another. Specialists interpreted the forces associated with a birth, ceremony, journey, or political event. The origin of the 260-day period remains debated. Researchers have proposed connections with agriculture, human gestation, astronomy, and seasonal observation. No single explanation has been proven for every region or time. What is clear is that the cycle became deeply embedded in Mesoamerican life. Alongside it operated a 365-day year. This count contained 18 periods of 20 days, producing 360 days, followed by 5 additional days. It followed the solar year more closely, although it did not use the leap day adjustment of the modern Gregorian calendar. The 260-day count and the 365-day year moved together. Imagine two wheels turning at different speeds. A particular combination of ritual day and solar date did not return every year. It repeated after 18,980 days, or roughly 52 years of 365 days each. This larger pattern is known as the calendar round. For many purposes, that combined date was sufficient. It created a problem, however, when scribes wanted to record deep history. If the same calendar round date returned after approximately 52 years, how could a monument distinguish one event from another that occurred in an earlier cycle? The long count provided the answer. Instead of describing only a position within repeating cycles, it recorded the number of days from a conventional starting point. That allowed scribes to place events along a much longer sequence. Dates separated by centuries could be distinguished. On a monument, a long count date acts almost like a historical coordinate. It tells researchers where an event belongs in time. The calculations depended on Maya number notation. Dots represented individual units. Bars represented groups of 5. A shell-like symbol served as 0. 0 was essential. Without it, a place value system could not clearly distinguish between an empty position and a missing number. The broader mathematical system was based largely on groups of 20. Calendar calculations made an adjustment, so that 18 groups of 20 days formed a 360-day unit close to a solar year. At first, the system can seem overwhelmingly complex, but each calendar answered a different question. The 260-day cycle described ritual qualities. The 365-day year organized seasonal time. The calendar round combined the two. The long count placed events across long spans of history. Other tables followed celestial cycles, such as Venus or possible eclipses. These were not competing systems. They worked together. A Maya inscription might therefore include several forms of dating. A ruler's accession could be placed within the long count, identified by its calendar round position, and linked with a larger anniversary or celestial event. Time was also political. A ruler, who performed a ceremony on a significant date, connected the reign with cosmic order. A monument raised at the completion of a period made that relationship visible. The ruler appeared not simply as a person governing territory, but as someone responsible for maintaining connections between society, ancestors, and time. This brings us to the most famous modern misunderstanding, the year 2012. Popular culture claimed that the Maya calendar predicted the destruction of the world on December 21st, 2012. That claim treated the completion of a major long count period as a final ending. But Maya time contained many endings and renewals. Completing a large unit could be important. It might inspire ceremony, commemoration, or reflection. It did not automatically mean the destruction of existence. Maya inscriptions also refer to dates beyond the period associated with 2012. The calendar was not a countdown to the end of the world. It was a system for organizing continuity. The popularity of the 2012 story shows how easily a complex intellectual achievement can be reduced to a sensational claim. The Maya did not create a mysterious clock that stopped in the modern age. They developed several ways to connect human action with cycles lasting days, years, decades, and centuries. Numbers alone, however, cannot preserve a historical event. Someone had to record the name of the person involved, the place, the action, the relationship. That depended on the achievement at the center of almost everything we know about the ancient Maya. Their writing. Number 1. Their writing recorded real people and events. A carved Maya monument may show a ruler standing above a captive. Around the figures are blocks of intricate signs. For centuries, outside researchers could recognize numbers and repeated calendar patterns. Much of the remaining text still appeared unreadable. The signs were often treated as symbols without spoken language. Had that interpretation been correct, the monuments might have recorded gods' dates or abstract ideas, but not complete historical statements. Decipherment came gradually. Researchers demonstrated that Maya writing represented language. Some signs functioned as logograms, expressing complete words or meaningful units. Others represented syllables, often combinations of a consonant and a vowel. Scribes could use both. A word might appear as one large logogram. It might be written phonetically with several syllabic signs. Or, a logogram could be accompanied by smaller phonetic elements that clarified its reading. This flexibility made the script visually rich. It also made it difficult to decipher. The same word could appear in more than one form. Signs changed according to region, period, and artistic style. A human head, an animal, a hand, an object, or an abstract shape could carry a linguistic value. The image formed part of the writing. But it was not simply a picture of the thing being discussed. Once the phonetic nature of the script became clear, inscriptions began to change before researchers' eyes. A group of signs once described only as ceremonial symbolism could be read as a verb. Another group became a personal name. A neighboring block identified a title. Dates could be linked with actions. The monuments were recording events. They described births, accessions to power, marriages, wars, captures, deaths, building dedications, ritual performances, the completion of calendar periods. They named parents, ancestors, allies, and enemies. This transformed Maya archaeology. A city was no longer understood only through architectural styles and pottery. It could possess a dynastic history. Rulers could be placed in sequence. Wars between kingdoms could be reconstructed. Marriage alliances could explain shifts in influence. A damaged inscription might contain the only surviving reference to a person who changed the history of an entire region. Maya writing appeared on many materials. Stone monuments were durable and public. Stairways could carry long historical texts. Wooden objects were carved, although few survived the tropical climate. Bones and shells held finely cut inscriptions. Ceramic vessels combined text with painted scenes. Codices used folded bark paper pages. Some inscriptions described the object on which they appeared. A vessel might state that it was a cup. It could name the person who owned it. It might even identify the artist who made or painted it. This is one of the most personal discoveries in Maya studies. Some scribes and sculptors signed their work. The signature might be small, almost hidden within the text around a royal figure. But it preserved the identity of the creator. Ancient American art was no longer entirely anonymous. Researchers could begin connecting several objects with the same named artist or workshop. Style, language, and biography came together. Writing also links the discoveries throughout this documentary. The word for cacao appears on vessels. Dates in codices depend on written numbers and day signs. Ball game scenes can be connected with named rulers and captives. Dedication texts reveal when buildings were completed. Long count inscriptions turn calendar cycles into historical chronology. Place names and dynastic titles help explain political relationships between cities connected by roads and trade. Writing provides something close to a Maya perspective, but even that perspective has limits. Most surviving monumental inscriptions were commissioned by rulers. They celebrate victories more often than defeats. They present political claims as if they were unquestionable truths. They rarely preserve the voices of farmers, craft workers, children, servants, or captives. An inscription must therefore be read critically. A ruler who claimed dominance may have been exaggerating. A monument that remains silent about a crisis does not prove the crisis never occurred. Writing is evidence. It is not an unbiased record. Without it, however, the Maya past would be far quieter. Consider a single carved figure. Before decipherment, researchers could describe the clothing, posture, and artistic style. After decipherment, they might recover the person's name, the date of birth, the date of accession, the name of a parent, a war against a neighboring kingdom, a ceremony performed 20 years later. The stone image becomes a biography. The distance between the present and the ancient world narrows. That is why Maya writing belongs at number 1. Roads demonstrate organization. Maya blue demonstrates technical knowledge. Calendars demonstrate mathematics and observation. Codices demonstrate systems of learning. Writing allows many of those achievements to be understood through words selected by Maya, scribes themselves. It gives history names. It gives actions verbs. It gives time a sequence. And it allows individuals who lived more than 1,000 years ago to emerge from anonymity. The script is still not completely understood. Some signs remain uncertain. Damaged passages resist interpretation. Languages changed across regions and centuries. New discoveries sometimes overturn older readings. That unfinished work is not a weakness. It is one reason the Maya past remains so active. A glyph stored in a museum may be read differently after another inscription is found. A monument beneath the forest may add a missing ruler to a dynasty. A painted fragment may preserve a word known nowhere else. The ancient Maya world is not a closed story. It is a text we are still learning to read. At first, these 10 discoveries may seem unrelated. A drink, a tooth, a steam-filled room, a blue pigment, a ball court, a road, a folding book, a solar alignment, several calendars, a writing system. Yet each belongs to the same interconnected world. Cacao joined agriculture with trade, hospitality, art, and language. Dental modification connected technical skill with personal and social identity. Sweat baths brought together architecture, healing, childbirth, ritual, and memory. Maya blue joined plants, minerals, heat, symbolism, and artistic production. The ball game transformed physical competition into public theater, mythology, and politics. White roads connected neighborhoods, cities, economies, and ceremonial landscapes. Codices carried knowledge in a portable form. Architecture made the movement of the sun part of community life. Several calendars organized human action within overlapping cycles. Writing preserved the names and events that allowed those systems to be studied as history. The ancient Maya often appear mysterious because so much has been lost. Books decayed. Cities were abandoned, transformed, or covered by vegetation. Political systems changed and collapsed. Colonial violence destroyed texts and institutions. For centuries, outsiders could not fully read Maya writing. That silence created space for fantasy. Pyramids were attributed to imaginary vanished peoples. Calendars became prophecies. Complex rituals were reduced to violence. The Maya were described as if they had disappeared completely. They did not. Maya communities survived invasion, forced labor, religious suppression, displacement, and political exclusion. Maya languages are still spoken. Traditions continue to change, adapt, and develop. The ancient past belongs within that living history, not outside it. Archaeology can reveal roads beneath the forest. Chemistry can identify cacao inside a vessel. Microscopy can explain why a pigment survived. Astronomy can test the orientation of a building. Epigraphy can recover a name. But every method has limits. No instrument can automatically reveal what every person believed. No royal inscription speaks for an entire population. No single city represents all Maya society. The strongest history emerges when different kinds of evidence are compared. A written claim against an excavation. A painted scene against human remains. A calendar date against architectural construction. A chemical result against the label on a cup. That process has already changed the story many times. It will change it again. Somewhere beneath the forests of Mesoamerica, another road may still be hidden. Another monument may carry the name of a ruler not yet known. A damaged page may preserve a calculation no one has fully understood. And a familiar object inside a museum may contain evidence no one has thought to test. The history of the Maya is not waiting to be invented. It is waiting to be recovered. One building, one artifact, one glyph, and one layer of earth at a time.